Most people never notice this, but there's a certain kind of person who can spend an entire day preparing to start something. The task is sitting there. The email, the project, the phone call, the decision. Nothing is physically preventing them from doing it. And yet somehow hours pass. They organize, they think, they plan. They tell themselves they'll start in 10 minutes, then 30, then tomorrow. By the end of the day, they often feel something strange. Not relief, not rest, a quiet frustration. Because the thing they wanted to do never actually happened. From the outside, it can look simple. People often respond with familiar advice. Just do it. Stop being lazy. You need more discipline, as if action were a switch that can simply be turned on. But what if that isn't what's happening at all? What if the brain isn't refusing to act? What if it's responding to something deeper? Because there's something important that often gets missed when people talk about procrastination. The assumption is that the person doesn't care enough, that they lack motivation, that they lack commitment. But psychology often points somewhere else entirely. In many cases, the delay is not a sign that the task feels unimportant. It's a sign that the task feels important. And that changes the story. The truth is that people who delay things are often misunderstood, including by themselves. They assume they have a productivity problem. Others assume they have a discipline problem. Yet psychology suggests there may be something more happening beneath the surface. Modern neuroscience describes the brain as a prediction machine. Long before you begin a task, your brain is already estimating what that experience will feel like. How difficult will it be? How uncomfortable will it be? How likely am I to succeed? How likely am I to fail? Most of this happens automatically, outside conscious awareness. The brain constantly evaluates potential outcomes and adjusts behavior accordingly. Researchers studying motivation have found that the brain does not simply move toward rewards.
It also moves away from anticipated discomfort. And sometimes the anticipated discomfort becomes larger than the task itself. This is where procrastination starts to look different. What most people assume is laziness. What psychology suggests is avoidance. What might actually be happening is that the nervous system is trying to protect itself from an experience it predicts will be unpleasant. The task becomes associated with pressure, expectation, uncertainty, potential failure, and the brain responds by creating distance, not because it wants the task to fail, because it wants the person to feel safer. At first glance, that may sound irrational, but the brain does this constantly. When something feels threatening, the nervous system tries to reduce exposure. Sometimes the threat is physical, sometimes it is emotional, and emotional threats can be surprisingly powerful. A difficult conversation, creative project, an important exam, a career decision. These experiences carry the possibility of disappointment, embarrassment, rejection, mistakes, and the brain notices all of it. This is where the story becomes more personal, because people rarely develop these patterns in isolation. Sometimes the habit begins in environments where performance carried emotional consequences. Maybe mistakes were criticized quickly. Maybe success felt expected rather than appreciated. Maybe failure felt bigger than it actually was. Maybe approval seemed tied to achievement. Experiences like these teach lessons, quietly, gradually, without anyone realizing it. The nervous system begins associating performance with emotional risk. The brain learns that getting things wrong can hurt. And once the brain learns that lesson, it starts preparing for danger before danger arrives. Not consciously, automatically. Over time, even ordinary tasks can begin carrying invisible emotional weight. This is why procrastination often appears most strongly around things that matter deeply. The project that could change your career, the opportunity you care deeply about, the goal that means something important. Ironically, the more meaningful the outcome feels, the harder it can become to begin, which brings us to a paradox. The problem is not always that people who procrastinate care too little. The The problem is often that they care too much. When something matters deeply, every possible outcome becomes visible. Every possible mistake, every possible criticism, every possible disappointment. What looks like avoidance is sometimes protection, an attempt to avoid emotional pain before it happens, an attempt to avoid discovering that reality may not match expectations, an attempt to protect self-worth from uncertainty. And that creates an interesting trade-off, because the same mind that anticipates risks often anticipates possibilities. The same person who imagines problems often imagines solutions. The same awareness that creates hesitation can create creativity.